Hi everyone, very good evening and welcome back to Crack Grade B. So in this particular session, we are going to talk about the alternate sources of finance, private and social cost benefit, public-private partnership, etc. These are all the things that we'll be talking about in this particular document, right? So alternate sources of finance, what does it mean? When we talk about alternate sources of finance, it talks about that apart from the traditional sources of financing, see, we have talked about primary market, we have also talked about secondary market, right? If someone wants the funds, they can go, they can issue shares, they can issue debentures, all such things can be issued by them. Understood? Now, but when we talk about alternate sources of finance, it talks about the financing sources apart from the primary and secondary market sources, right? Primary और secondary market के जो हमारे sources थे, उनके अलावा from where you can just get the finance. So this is what we will be talking about over here. The number one thing that gets reflected is factoring. ठीक है? ये क्या है? Factoring. So factoring is a financial transaction and it is a type of debtor finance. See, debtor finance, I'll just tell you the concept of factoring first of all to you, and then we'll go on to read that what is this whole concept all about. Under factoring, what happens is, suppose I have sold goods, ठीक है, मैंने कुछ सामान बेचा है and I'm the seller. Let's just understand this. Wait. Yes. So, suppose I am the seller, right? I have sold something and here is the buyer, right? I have sold the goods and he has to give me the money. This is how transactions happen. But if in this particular case, if this buyer defaults, ठीक है, अगर ये buyer क्या करता है, not the defaulting, but he delays, right? It delays the payment. In such a case, what is there, even if I have provided him, suppose I have provided him a 2 months credit period. 2 महीने का I have given the credit period. Now in such a scenario, what happens is I will be short of working capital. I will be short of working capital. So this is why I will contact any other agency, right? I will contact any other entity and I will say to them that, listen, I want to discount my invoice, right? The goods you have sold to the buyer, you might have, you will be having an invoice, right? This invoice proves that you have sold the goods and buyer is bound to pay you the money. So by using this particular invoice, you will give to the factor, right? Factor is the institution, and you will say that keep this invoice, give me my money right now to me. You can keep some amount as your commission or fees, right? And the later on factor will recover that amount from the buyer. So we have read this kind of concept time and again. If you remember trades, right? That was the platform that was developed for the MSMEs. What was the concept over there? The concept was the discounting of invoices. Why discounting of invoices? In order to get the amount, ठीक है, ताकि आपको पैसा मिल जाए. See, any small seller or any kind of seller, they are really short on working capital. Working capital नहीं होती इतनी, so they need their money. That is why everyone prefers cash sales. If you see, हर कोई cash sale prefer करता है, because in case of credit sales, you are not aware that by what time you will be getting your money. So factoring is why it is an alternate source of finance, because the amount that was blocked with the buyer, ठीक है, जो हमने sales की, amount that was blocked with the buyer, I can encash that amount through factoring. ठीक है, factoring के through I can encash that particular amount and I will be having funds and I will not be short of the working capital. So this is the concept of factoring. चलिए अब देखते हैं what we all have to study over here. See, we will quickly do this because it is an easy chapter. Factoring is a financial transaction and it is a type of debtor finance in which business sells its account receivable. So I was supposed to receive 10,000 rupees from my buyer, but I am in need of the urgent funds. So I'm selling what? I am selling my account receivables. What is the document through which I am selling my account receivable? I am selling it through the use of invoice. ठीक है, कैसे सेल कर रही हूं मैं? इनवॉइस के यूज से. सो टू अ थर्ड पार्टी. सो देयर इज अ सेलर, a buyer, right? And then there is a factor. Factor is a third party. Factor gives the money to the seller before the maturity and after that they recover the amount from the buyer. So it is differs from the invoice discounting. The concept of invoice discounting involves getting the invoice discounted at a certain rate to get the funds, whereas the concept of factoring is a little bit broader. Factoring involves selling of all the accounts receivables to an outside agency. See, the crux remains the same, right? What you are actually doing is you are, like we have read in TREDS, right? TREDS, if you remember that particular concept. That, wait. See, this is the diagram. Okay, when you do a discount just one invoice, right? When you discount just one invoice, that is called as invoice discounting, right? Means you are taking discounting transaction by transaction. ठीक है, suppose there is a buyer. Okay, there is a buyer, Mr. A. I made a sales to him for 1 lakh rupees, right? I want to discount this particular transaction. So this is just one transaction. But when I have given all such debtors like A, C, B, E, F, these are all what? These are my debtors, right? इन सारे डेटर्स को जितनी भी सेल्स मैंने की है, whatever sales I have done to all these debtors, I give this particular task to a third party. This is called as factoring. So that means crux is same, but factoring is on a larger scale. Now why will someone do factoring? ठीक है, क्यों कोई करेगा? Number one thing, see, if a third party is providing you the services, then they are going to charge the commission or fees for it, right? Nobody does nothing for free. So therefore they will be charging commission. Now what is the advantage for the seller over here? See, in case if seller will collect from debtors on its own, then there are various expenses. There are collection expenses, right? You might have to keep one person to call the debtors. Okay, so there are administrative expenses as well. So all such expenses and as well as the headache of collection, it gets transferred to a third party so that you can now focus on the other important task. ठीक है, so it is a process of outsourcing. ठीक है, इसको क्या बोलते हैं? It is a process of outsourcing. Why it is done? So obviously they will be charging some amount for it, but there is better ease of administration. आपको ज़्यादा फोकस नहीं करना है कि ठीक है किसने पैसे दिए किसने पैसे नहीं दिए. All that headache goes to a factor. ठीक है. Now let's talk about the concept of factoring. Very quickly we are going to see what all is written over here. ठीक है, please read along with me. So factoring works best in the cases where the seller doesn't have enough balance sheet standing or collateral support to raise the standalone working capital finance. Factoring typically works well for the small and the medium segment. Why for small and medium segment? Because small and medium segment has शॉर्ट वर्किंग कैपिटल, ठीक है, इनके पास जो है वर्किंग कैपिटल का अमाउंट थोड़ा कम होता है, सो दे वांट क्विक कलेक्शन, ठीक है। ये जो स्मॉल मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस होती हैं, दी स्मॉल मीडियम एंटरप्राइजेस, दे वांट क्विकर कलेक्शन एंड दैट इज व्हाई दे टेक द services of factors. Number one thing, please remember. After that, companies in their growth phases where the risk appetite remains constrained, they do not want to face the risks of bad debts. Bad debts का ज़्यादा risk उनको चाहिए नहीं. So what they do is a seller in such a cases will be able to convert the such receivables to cash, thus aiding his working capital cycle. See, I did a credit sale. Now buyer says he will pay me in 60 days. Through the concept of factoring, I am getting my payment within 5 days. So see, it is such a huge boost to me. I will be able to do more production, ठीक है, क्योंकि I have the funds with me. मेरे पास पैसे हैं, then I will be able to do more production. So this is also one of the important thing. A factor can also provide company with the special add-ons like credit protection against bad debts, outsourcing of their sales book, and funds collection, etc. So these are all the services that are provided by a factor, ठीक है. Next is the seller makes the sale of goods. See, so what does seller do? He does sales the goods, he generates invoices, right? He sells these invoices combined to a particular third party called as the factor. Factor does not make the payment of all invoices immediately. It pays 75 to 80% of the invoice value. It deducts some amount of discount, right? The remaining percentage is paid after the factor receives the payment from the seller's customer. Factor will normally therefore prepay only to the extent of cost of goods. That means obviously factor is also having the risk of non-collection. So it does pay 75% to 80% and the remaining amount it keeps with itself. It depends on my what you can say justifications that I give for derivatives. I am estimating that there will be 3 more classes for derivatives apart from what has already been held, because yeah, we'll be able to complete that in 3 more classes. Now factoring company undertakes a transaction based on the quality of receivables. Factoring companies are able to turn around a funding proposal, and these are all different things. You can just skip this particular paragraph. Now talking about the charges. So the cost structures, they vary across geographies, right? The usual heads of cost includes the interest charges for the funded amount as well as the service charges. Additional add-ons like credit protection and collection could be charged separately. So the services that a factor is providing, factor is going to charge the amount for it. Service charges will be there. If you take some additional services means, see, in this particular case, what factor is doing? Factor is just doing the work of collection for you, ठीक है. यहाँ पे आपको एक बात बहुत समझने की जरूरत है. Factor is only doing the collection for you. They are not taking the risk of non-payment. What do I mean to say by this? I mean to say, see, a debtor was supposed to pay me within 60 days, right? But factor gives me 75 to 80% of the value within 4 to 5 days, okay? So I am getting the funds, but factor says this is subject to the collection of the amount. अगर buyer ने pay कर दिया, then okay, 75 to 80% also you can keep, and the remaining amount we will give you. You have to give the service charges for us. But suppose if the buyer defaults, अगर उसने पैसे नहीं दिए, so in such a case, the amount that has been given to the seller, it will be इंटरेस्ट बेस्ड चार्जेबल, ठीक है, क्योंकि कलेक्शन नहीं हुआ है. सो द बैड डेट्स दैट हैज अराइज्ड, द रिस्क इज ऑफ द सेलर, ठीक है. बैड डेट्स अगर हो गया है तो उसका रिस्क किसको जाएगा? सेलर को जाएगा. अच्छा, वन मोर थिंग दैट वी विल टॉक ओवर हियर, सम एडिशनल सर्विसेज कैन आल्सो बी गिवन, लाइक सेलर कैन से टू द फैक्टर, सी, the risk of non collection has to be borne by you. So factor says yes, I will do that, but I will charge extra for it. So jitni bhi additional services aap loge, if you are taking collection, then there will be charges for it. If you want that the factor should bear the risk of non collection, then there will be charges for that as well. ठीक है? Now let's see the types of factoring. चलिए, so number one is we have recourse factoring. Under recourse factoring, what you have to do, see, the whole transaction is the same, okay? Factor purchases the trade debts and factor gives the collection services. What service he does give? The collection services. But in case the buyer defaults, right? अगर buyer ने default कर दिया, then non-payment by a trade debtor, the factor has got the right to collect the unpaid invoice amount from the seller. Okay, if the buyer has defaulted, then the factor will take back his money from the seller. This means under recourse factoring, there is no bad debt protection. Okay, bad debt protection is not there. Please remember this, there is no bad debt protection if bad debts happen. Bad debts का मतलब if the debtor does not pay, in such a case the liability or the risk will fall on the seller. ठीक है, किसके ऊपर होगा? Seller के ऊपर होगा. Now let's talk about non-recourse factoring. Now this kind of recourse factoring, it is popular in the developing countries. Now, under the non-recourse factoring, the factor's obligation to the seller, it becomes absolute on the due date of invoice, irrespective of the payment made or non-made by the trade debtor. So this is just the opposite of the recourse factoring. In recourse factoring, there is no bad debt protection, whereas if you see over here, there is a bad debt protection provided, and as a result of it, please focus on this particular line, factor charges are higher. ठीक है, factor charges are higher. Why factor charges are higher? Because the bad debt related protection is being provided. Now this kind of factoring is popular in the developed countries. ठीक है, so whatever is the loss from the irrecoverable debts, it will be borne by whom? It will be borne by the factor. So whatever the lines I am just marking over here, you have to focus on to it, right? Those are the lines that you have to remember, and the rest of is just for the understanding, and you can understand it. Now next is the advance and maturity factoring. Now what happens in case of here? Let's see. Sometimes the factors and the client means the seller, they make an arrangement where the factor pays a pre-specified portion in advance to the client, right, on submission of necessary documents. This is called as the advance factoring, right? Now generally the factoring in advance and the factor pays 80% of the invoice amount in advance. But under the maturity factoring, no advance will be made and payment will be made only on the guaranteed payment date or on the date of collection. तो कोई advance दिया नहीं जाएगा. Just see this kind of thing, the maturity factoring, sometimes this is combined with the bad debts protection. ठीक है, bad debts protection के साथ combined होता है. How I will tell you. So they say we are not going to give you an advance thing, but on the date of maturity we are going to give you the 100%. Date of maturity means the date the buyer is going to make the payment. But what is the benefit of here, right? So suppose this particular thing, try to understand this. Suppose if there is a factor, right? You have appointed a factor. Why you have appointed it? So that you can collect the amount in advance, right? This is the benefit that we are having. But if factor is saying that we are going to pay you the amount only on the maturity. हम आपको सिर्फ maturity के time पे देंगे. That means it is the maturity factoring. It is sometimes combined with your what you can say, the bad debts protection. That means the factor says after 2 months whether buyer will pay you or not, right? चाहे default हो या ना हो, we are going to give you 100% of amount, but our condition is that we will not pay you any advance. हम आपको कोई advance नहीं देंगे, but on the date of maturity we will give you 100% irrespective of the collection that we have made. ठीक है, irrespective of the collection. So this is what the difference between the advance and the maturity factoring. Old line factoring is also known as the full factoring, as it provides the all services together. What kind of services? Like collection services is being provided, credit protection is being provided, credit sales ledger administration, right? Short term finance, everything has been provided under this. Short term finance का मतलब क्या होता है? Giving advance. Giving advance. Okay, so all these things will be provided by the factor. This is called as the old line factoring. Next is we have cross border factoring or the international factoring. See, in such a case, in domestic factoring, there are three parties. Number one is the customer, who is the buyer. Then there is a client, the seller, who's purchasing the factoring services. And then we have a factor. Factor is a financial institution. Whereas when we go in talk about the international factoring, right, there will be four parties. Number one, we'll be having an exporter who has exported the goods, right? Because this is out of the country. So now the importer, obviously he is going to be the customer. Export factor and import factor. Thus, in international business transaction, they are provided by the factors of both the countries, right? And this is known as the cross-border factoring. What is the need of appointing two factors? So there is a problem in both the cases, right? The one who is exporting has the issue that whether they will be able to collect the money or not. ठीक है, उनको ये वाली दिक्कत है. And the one who is importing, they are worried about the goods and also the transmission. ठीक है, so these factors which are there in both the countries, they ensure smooth flow of funds from one country to the another country. They coordinate, generally they are banks. Okay, so the coordination becomes much more easier. So this is called as a cross border factoring. Now next is talking about the factoring in India. There are few things that you have to just see over here. So number one thing, there is a committee formed by the RBI. So CS Kalyan Sundaram, the former managing director of the SBI, why this particular committee was formulated. So they recommended the introduction of factoring services in India. The State Bank of India, in association with all these banks, SEBI, Union Bank of India, they have set up the SBI Factors and the Commercial Services in 1991. SBI Factors, it was the first factoring company to be set up in India. Now, why I have told you that these factors are normally the banks, and they can be financial institutions, but predominantly they have been banks. Why? Because factoring involves giving the money, right? So if I have to make someone understand, this is a kind of loan that you are giving, and what is the collateral in this? The invoice that the seller has made, this is a collateral. ठीक है, invoice gives the right to the factor that they can collect the money from the customer. ठीक है, जो invoice होती है seller की, वो एक right देती है factor को कि आप कल को जाके customer से money collect कर सकते हैं. So factoring is what? It is a kind of loan, and who can give it? only such kind of institutions give such kind of financial services, those who are having deep pockets, जिनके पास पैसा है. जिनके पास पैसा ही नहीं है वो किस तरीके की सर्विस देंगे? They cannot give. Now the SBI factors, they offer two types of products under the domestic factoring. Let's just see that. Yes. So number one is bill to cash and number two is cash for purchase. So under this, the seller invoices the goods to the buyer, assigns the same to the SBI factors and receives prepayment up to the 90% of the invoice value immediately. This can be with recourse or without recourse. What does with recourse and without recourse means? It means with recourse, your protection for bad debts might be provided, might not be provided. It depends on the option that the client is taking. Okay? If the client just wants the collection services, then it will be without recourse. But if the client also wants protection from bad debts, then it will be with recourse. Okay? So please remember this. This is called as bill to cash. Next is cash for purchase. So it facilitates the instant payment for the purchases made and is generally sanctioned in conjunction with the receivable factoring facility or the export factoring facility. So this is related to the sales, right? And this is related to the purchases. Okay. So these are the two kind of factoring services that are made. Now you might be thinking कि ये क्या है? Okay, I'll tell you. Suppose let's take a normal example and then we'll come on to it. I want to buy, right now there is too much heat, right? The weather is quite hot and humid. So I want to buy an air conditioner. But I want to buy, so I'm a purchaser, okay? But I do not have enough money. I do not have money in cash right now. So what I'm going to do is I will just pick up my credit card and I will buy the AC unit, right? So in this particular situation, did I make the payment? No, because I did not have any amount. Who made the payment? The bank made the payment on my behalf because bank is sure that bank will be able to collect this amount from me after 45 days, right? So the same thing is happening over here as well. If you are purchasing something, you need to pay instantly. Remember, we did talk about in the cross-border factoring, there are factors on the both the side. That means banks are there on both the sides, seller ki side mein bhi, purchaser ki side mein bhi. Why there is a factor on the purchaser side? For the smooth flow of money from here to there. Suppose the exporter requires instant payment. Okay? Exporter requires instant payment, or let's say within 10 days, within 15 days. But buyer is not in the condition to pay. So in such a situation, buyer will say to its bank that please make the payment on behalf of me. Obviously bank is going to charge some amount for it. ठीक है, ऐसे तो कुछ समाज सेवा तो नहीं कर रहे बैंक. So this is the kind of service that bank gives to the purchasers. I hope you have understood this. So there are various, now see, these are the additional readings you can do on your own. ठीक है. Now if you see on the crux, right, what is the crux of all this? So if you at the end of the day, what we are doing is just financing, right? हम क्या कर रहे हैं? Finance ही तो दे रहे हैं. If you talk about factoring, a person who has sold his goods, he wants instant cash, right? उसको पैसा चाहिए. What bank or a factor is doing? Providing him with the money. So this is why it is called as the alternate source of finance. Now the direct sources, see why they have been called as alternate, because they are not that much common in the society, right? What are the common things that we are having? We are having share based finances, debenture based finances, we are having the bank loans, right? They are most commonly used, and that is why the things which are new on the horizon, or which are not that much prevalent, not that much taken up, we are calling them as the alternate source of finance. Okay? Now there are few differences between the factoring and the bill discounting. Let's just talk about them as well. Although I have told you that a bill discounting is a subset. Subset मतलब छोटा part है factoring का. ठीक है? Under factoring, whole debtor system is taken up. Whereas in bill discounting, one bill is discounted or two bills are discounted. So the transactions which are happening in bill discounting is bill wise, whereas in the factoring we are doing it debtor wise. ठीक है? Factoring में हम किस तरीके से कर रहे हैं? Debtor wise. Now bill discounting is always with recourse, whereas factoring can be with either recourse or without recourse. We have talked about it. In bill discounting, the drawer undertakes the responsibility of collecting the bill, right? And while the factor usually undertakes to collect the bills of the client. This facility limits itself to the mode of finance and only that. But factor might provide you other services as well, जैसे कि sales ledger maintenance, right? Advisory services. Discounted bill may be rediscounted several times, right? But once debts purchased by factoring, they cannot be re-discounted or refinanced. ठीक है? एक बार दे दिया तो दे दिया. Whereas the bill discounting can be done several times. Bill discounting is an individual transaction, I told you, whereas the factoring facility, all invoices related to a debtor are provided to the factor. Bill discounting does not involve assignment of debts, right? Assignment of debts means the complete assignment of debt is not given to the bill discounter. They just talk about a single bill and a finance related to that. बस उतना ही. Now we will be talking about forfeiting. ठीक है? This is specifically in terms of export or import. You will be seeing that we are performing the similar nature of services over here as well. ठीक है? First we are going to read it and then we are going to find out the differences among them. So but the first thing that you need to remember is forfeiting is related to export import transactions. ठीक है? So it is a method of trade finance which allows the exporters to obtain cash by selling their medium term foreign receivables. See, it is medium term. That means there is some time. Foreign account receivables at a discount on a without recourse basis. A forfeiter is a finance firm or a bank that performs non-recourse export financing through the purchase of medium-term trade receivables. Now, this line you should focus on. It is similar to factoring. Forfeiting virtually eliminates the risk of non-payment once the goods have been delivered to the foreign buyer, right? Unlike factors, forfeiters typically work with exporters who sell capital goods, commodities, and the large products, and they provide them the credit from 180 days to up to 7 years. So this is the time for which the credit has been provided. In forfeiting, the receivables are normally guaranteed by the importer's bank, allowing the exporter to take the transaction off the balance sheet to enhance its financial ratios. ठीक है? So let's talk about the differences over here. See, basically forfeiting, under the forfeiting, it is a tool for the exporter. Number one thing. Apart from the thing, it is available on a without recourse basis. Why? I'll tell you. Number 3, it is based on the medium term foreign receivable. Medium term foreign receivable means the money that you will be getting, it will be anywhere between 180 days to 7 years. That means हो सकता है 6 months में payment मिल जाए and हो सकता है there might be 7 years. Okay, there might be a duration of 7 years. So the finance that is being provided is for medium term. See, 7-year timing is a medium term for the bank, right? Anything beyond that, like 10 years and beyond, that is called as a long term financing. Otherwise it comes under the medium term financing. Okay, so these things are provided. Now why the risk is not here? The thing is, see the timing, 180 days to 7 years. ठीक है, 180 days से 7 years. So in such a situation, the importers bank, there are always one importer bank, one exporter banks, right? Importers bank guarantees the payment. ठीक है, पेमेंट को गारंटी करते हैं कि that we will be making you the payment. See, nobody waits for such long duration without guarantee. ठीक है, how does the guarantees are provided? For example, letter of credits, they are being issued कि in case this person fails to make the payment, we are going to make the payment. So this is how export transactions are carried out. Now let's compare factoring with forfeiting. Factoring is a bigger concept. ठीक है, factoring एक बड़ा concept है where both the domestic as well as international transactions are involved. But when I talk about the forfeiting, forfeiting is a small part of factoring, that's what you can say. It only talks about international transactions, number one thing. Number two thing is this is for the medium term finance. ठीक है, इसीलिए अलग नाम दिया गया है because this is for the medium term. And number 3, the risk of non-payment is practically eliminated over here. How it is eliminated? Because the importers bank promises or gives the guarantee for the payment. इसीलिए जो exporter होते हैं वो बस assured होते हैं. Then why do they need forfeiting? Can someone out of you tell me? Even if, see, it is clearly written over here. See, it virtually eliminates the risk of non-payment. ठीक है, why non-payment? Because the bank guarantees it. Now why your exporter is involving a forfeiter? Can you just tell me? Anyone? जब नॉन पेमेंट का रिस्क ही नहीं है तब हम क्यों एक फोरफेटर को इन्वॉल्व कर रहे हैं? व्हाई द एक्सपोर्टर इज इन्वॉल्विंग अ फोरफेटर? एनी आइडिया रिगार्डिंग दैट? See, why we are doing this, the number thing is it is a medium term invoice, right? You might be getting the payment in 6 months or it might take up to 7 years. ठीक है, 7 साल भी लग सकते हैं. So what you want is the finance, you want your forfeiter to discount the bill for you. ठीक है, वो आपको अभी पैसे दे दे and later on the whenever the collection will come from the customer, the forfeiter can take it, right? So this is the purpose of involving a forfeiter, and this is why, because the bad debts related thing is not there. Yes, good Amrita. So he is in the need of money. He is not afraid of the bad debts. Bad debts का उसको कोई चिंता नहीं है. He just wants the payment for it. Now, this is all you can just see. This is some history that is not at all relevant. Trade receivables could be in the form of bill of exchange, promissory note, book receivables, etc. etc. We have to see this particular thing. This is important for us. Okay, so there is request for the deferred payment for more than 60 days. Number one thing. Okay, that means the amount or the invoice is for a period of more than 60 days. The contract is for at least US dollar 1 lakh or its equivalent in a freely convertible currency, and when each shipment is not less than 25,000 US dollars. Either a letter of credit or a bank guarantee is available to the exporter. See, I told you, this is the standalone feature over here. ठीक, एक letter of credit is available from the bank. Bank promises, the importer's bank. See, in case of international transactions or import-export related transactions where the value involved is too much high, what happens is there is importer, right, and here is exporter, and the bank will also be involved. So this importer will provide the letter of credit to the exporter through its banks. Okay? Letter of credit related fraud we have already seen in India. So I hope you are aware about it. Letter of credit guarantees the exporter that if this person is not able to pay, we are going to pay. Just please rest assured. Okay? Next, what are the things? So the sale is made to a buyer in a high credit risk country. The exporter's own bank limits are inadequate or not available. So exporter's bank is not providing the facilities. So in such a situation, he will go for the forfeiting through financial institutions. Now what are the key points over here? It eliminates all risk to the exporter as he gets 100% of the finance, allows offering open account in the market, generally works with bill of exchange, promissory note, etc. Normally requires the exporter to obtain a bank guarantee for the foreign buyer. That means it requires that, dear exporter, please collect a bank guarantee from the importer's behalf. ठीक है? Forfeiting is a non-recourse and off-balance sheet financing. It eliminates all the risk from the exporter's book. Commercial banks usually do not fund credit risk beyond 180 days, and hence financing long tenor receivables for forfeiting is the only option. Commercial banks does not go for beyond than this. So that is why this point is also written that exporter's own bank's limits are inadequate and therefore the exporter has to go to the financial institutions other than the commercial banks. There are so many non-banking finance companies, okay, so they are not doing the banking business but they are into the financing thing, so they provide such kind of services. Okay, now this pricing and the growth of forfeiting etc. we will just talk about it. First I would like to discuss few things. So this is the thing that I will be discussing later, that means tomorrow. Right now I want to discuss about NABARD, right? I remember one of you asked about this particular doubt. So NABARD के बारे में थोड़ा सा discussion करेंगे and I will be taking, I have thought about that preserving one day just for it might not be a feasible option. So on daily basis I will be taking up your doubts at the end of the session and it might be helpful for you. So first let's talk about NABARD. Can you guys just tell me what is the full form of NABARD? So for the context, for those who are not aware about it, someone asked me that we are going to do a transmission from LIBOR to the other exchange rates, right? We are going to transfer to other interest rates, not exchange rates, but the interest rates. So what is going to be the impact for this, or how we shall understand this, etc. So yes, right. So LIBOR is London Interbank Rate, okay? Yeah, you can just do this. Now, why we have to understand what this rate is being used for, ठीक है? किस चीज़ के लिए use होता है? So you see, the banks they give to each other short term credit, right? So the key term over here is, we are just going to discuss the crux of the topic. So short term credit. I'm just talking about the points on which you should focus. ठीक, LIBOR is being used for the short term credit. Short term credit का मतलब होता है when one bank is providing the funds to the other bank or the financial institution, at what rate they will give such loan. See, if someone asks me, suppose I have to give loan to my friend, right? So my friend is demanding some money for a short term period. So someone asks me that at for what rate you are going to give. So I will quote a interest rate ki okay, I will be giving this particular loan at 8%. So this is what is done with the other banks as well, right? What is done? So banks are asked that at what interest rate you are going to provide short term loans to the other banks who are demanding it. Okay? Now this particular thing, this LIBOR, it involves 5 currencies and 7 maturities. Seven maturity and 5 currencies. Can someone tell me that what are those 5 currencies? वो 5 currencies क्या हैं? Good. We have dollar, we have pounds. What else? Yen. Good. We have euro, and then we have Swiss franc, right? Right? So these are the 5 currencies that we are having: USD, pounds, yen, euro, Swiss francs. Now please tell me the maturities that we are having. क्या क्या maturities हैं हमारे पास में? Anyone? So see, it ranges from 1 week to 12 months. Okay, it ranges from 1 week duration to 12 months. Someone is requiring the funds for 1 week, or someone is requiring the money for 12 months. So this is all what is there. Now 5 currencies, 7 maturities, that means there are 35 interest rates that are being provided. ठीक है, 35 इंटरेस्ट रेट्स प्रोवाइड की जाती हैं. लाइक फॉर एग्जांपल, द मोस्ट कोटेड अमंग, मतलब मोस्ट यूज्ड आउट ऑफ दीज इज 3 months US dollar. This means what? I'll tell you. दिस इज द मोस्ट यूज्ड वन. ठीक है, इसका मतलब क्या होता है? इफ समवन रिक्वायर्स द फंड्स इन US dollars for a 3-month time period, then what will be the interest rate charged for it? इसके लिए क्या इंटरेस्ट रेट चार्ज किया जाएगा? सिमिलरली, इफ समवन रिक्वायर्स amount for 12 months period in euros, then there will be a separate rate for that. So this was the concept of whole LIBOR. It was interbank rates. ठीक है, interbank rates means the interest rate at which one bank will give the funding to other bank for a short term period, because as you can see the maximum amount of maturity is 12 months. ठीक है, maximum amount of maturity क्या है? 12 months. So I hope you have understood the context of LIBOR, right? Once you have understood this, now just let's talk about why it is being withdrawn. क्यों withdraw किया जा रहा है? So we will keep the discussion up to this, and then we'll talk tomorrow why, what are the alternatives for it, right, and what is the impact for of this on India. These are the two things that I will be covering tomorrow. So the problem was, I'll tell you, the problem was again the you can say the tinkering with the interest rates, right? You can just wait for a second. Yes. So why this was done was there was tinkering, right? There was a fraud that was happening in these interest rates. I'll tell you how. So banks has to quote a interest rate at which they are going to offer, ठीक है? But there are certain traders, ठीक है? These traders, they had the financial products related to LIBOR. Now if the interest rates would have increased, then these traders would have faced losses. तो इन ट्रेडर्स के को प्रॉफिट में रखने के लिए ये जो बैंक्स हैं ये क्या करते थे, they did not increase the LIBOR interest rates, they kept it low fraudulently, ठीक है, जानबूझकर LIBOR interest rates को नीचे रखते थे, so that the traders who are having financial products linked to LIBOR, they remain in profits, ठीक है, उनको profit, वो profit में रहें. So this was the practice that was going on, and whenever such kind of things they arise, they lead to a लॉस इन दी इन्वेस्टर ट्रस्ट एंड कॉन्फिडेंस, ठीक है, फिर लोगों को उस चीज पे भरोसा नहीं रहता. सो दिस इज व्हाई दिस इज बीइंग abolished, and various alternatives are being washed out for it. SFOR is the one that we will see tomorrow, ठीक है. So this is it that I wanted to discuss in this particular session. We will be continuing talking about alternate source of finance, ठीक है, easy है, ज़्यादा कोई tough नहीं है, and these are the things also, some additional points also I will be covering in the last timing that I will be having 5 to 7 minutes, इतने में I will cover, ठीक है. Okay, thank you so much. Good night everyone.